Welcome to another edition of What's This Show For? FOR, Friends of Ron. I'm Ron Levitsky, your host. You know, it's very common for people to look forward to their retirement, only once they retire they find they have lots of time on their hands. Studies have shown this is especially true of men who often have their social engagements in groups through either work or through their wife planning a social calendar. And sometimes when they're kind of left on their own, it becomes very difficult. Well, what do you do in that situation? A number of years ago, a number of gentlemen from the North Shore, this area, decided to do something about it, and they formed a group called Men Enjoying Leisure, or MEL for short. We have with us a number of these people, and we're going to focus on one group in MEL, the writing group. But first, I'd like to introduce two of my guests today, Bill Gorelnick and Al Zimler. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Rod.
Bill, I understand that you're one of the founding members, kind of the George Washington of MEL.
Almost.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I grew up in the city, in Chicago, like most of us did, and moved out to the suburbs lately. I worked as a chemical engineer in my career and active in community affairs, Morton Grove, and got involved in MEL just by teaching computers to seniors over at Weinger JCC, and that's where it all started.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. When did you retire?
I read January 1999, so I guess it's an anniversary today.
Okay, 1999. And so then during your retirement, you did a little of volunteer work?
Right. I've been volunteering in the city at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. I've been a driver there for 14 years.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about MEL then. How did it get started?
Well, MEL, I would almost say, came up from the mud.
So it's not mud enjoying leisure.
Well, it did at the beginning. Sue Klein, who was on the staff at the JCC, gathered a few of us in the computer lab and a few others and said we ought to have a different kind of men's group. A traditional men's group meets once a month, has a Danish for breakfast, and listens to a speaker and maybe falls asleep. So she thought men who are retired should be more active. So we formed a group, and we had about 8 guys at the first meeting, and we called ourselves MUD, Men with Unfulfilled Desires. The thought being we would do things that we didn't have time to do while we were working. And the second part would be community service, because most people were in business, and there would be a way for us to contribute. So after the first meeting, we agreed to meet a month later in June of 2000, and there was only 4 of us left who thought it was a viable thing. And we decided we were going to move forward. About a month later, we changed our name to MEL because Men with Unfulfilled Desires didn't sound too commercially viable.
It might attract a lot of women. It sounds like a pretty interesting thing. But I understand your point. Okay, and then how did you, I understand now you're full. I mean, how did you attract more members?
Well, we did start to advertise. By about a year later, we had 14 members. And we had some news releases in the local papers looking for active members. And it took us a year to get the 14 members. And we'll talk about one of the key people being Rabbi Alan Bregman from Highland Park.
Okay. And how many members do you have today?
Today, we just collected our dues. We have 129 members.
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
In 2008, we were at 100, and we decided to close the membership, so we spawned off 4 other men's groups in the area. But we feel that MEL has some characteristics that are different than the others.
So just within your group, there are close to 130 members?
Yes.
Wow. Al, when did you join MEL?
I joined MEL about 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago.
And what did you do for a living before that?
I'm a certified public accountant. So my practice, which was out in Elgin, moved to Winnetka to be near our son and daughter-in-law, and so that we can, be taken care of in our old age. Instead, we're taking care of them, i.e. by by being there when the plumber is at their house and things of that nature.
And why did you join MEL?
Because I was looking for an activity, and I had heard about that, and I called up, and one of the 4 original guys said, I called on a Thursday, and they said, oh, we're having a meeting tomorrow. And I came in, and I stood for about 10 minutes. I said, who do I pay? I want to join this organization. And so I was the 75th member.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you count kind of the number.
Well,
When you get to move up.
well, they were going to cut it off, I think, at 80, and then they decided they would do 100, and we still have these questions. Should we increase the membership, or we'll see what happens after the dues are paid each and every year. So.
Okay. Now I understand that you're the leader of one of the perhaps more active groups, the writing group. How did that get started?
Well, as Bill would have explained to you, in MEL, anyone who wants to start an activity, it's up to them to start activities. No one's saying, well, we should have this or that, unless you have someone to do this or that. So I decided to have a writing group because I have taken writing classes, and so I sent an email which goes out to all the members and said, we're starting a writing class, a writing group rather, at my house, and last Thursday we had the 77th one, so we've been running it for 6 years, and we've had some great writers, and you'll hear from the great writers shortly.
We're looking forward to that.
And
about how many members are in your particular writing group?
In winter, about 4. When they come back from vacation, we have anywhere from 8 to 10 will show up at my house.
Okay, but it's fairly, you meet every month?
We meet the first Thursday of every month.
Okay, and we'll talk in a moment about how you structure the writing group, because there are different ways of doing it, but you're right that we do have some wonderful writers from your group, and we want to make sure that all of them have an opportunity to be featured. So why don't we start with our first reader, Larry Feldman, who's going to read a poem about the Korean War. So Larry, let's turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Our pleasure. And if you want to give us just real quickly the background of this before you read it, that'd be great.
The background of this is, I was going to read a little bit about the background, so it'll give you some idea. During the Korean War, I served a year atop a Korean mountain.
Let's take a little bit closer to the mic.
Okay.
If you need to pull it down a little bit. There you go.
Oh. Shall I start again?
Yes, please.
During the Korean War, I served a year atop a Korean mountain as a member of the 5th Air Force 2nd Radio Relay Squadron. This mountain is 1,500 feet high, and its name is Kirong-sung, which I'm told means Chicken Dragon Mountain. At this time, 1952, negotiations were going on at Panmunjom between the combatant parties. For what seemed like months, radio news broadcasts opened with the sentence, "There has been no progress at Panmunjom today." And so I utilized that saying in this poem, a poem which I call Slow Armistice. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. A silent patrol slugs miserably through the mud on cold and freezing feet, their thoughts on family and home, but holding their guns at the ready and jumping at the slightest sound. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. In the bleak sky over North Korea, a pilot, weary of the stresses placed upon him, observes the fiery upheavals of his bombs, leaving a path of fiery destruction so that men may build anew. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. A sudden flare brilliantly lighting mountains and valleys causes men to shrink and seek their holes. In the distance, with a dull roar, artillery lets fly, sending gleaming swords of death whistling, fearsome through the night. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. With a flaming roar, a tank becomes a torch, its crew perishing in the Holocaust. It has become just one more knocked out tank, but never to the 7 mothers who weep at home. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. A newly homeless child wanders tearfully alone, the shattered wreckage of his home and family, a ghastly tribute to the god of war.
Thank you. It's very powerful. I noticed that you use the repetition, no progress, which is a common, very powerful way of the poets used it. Did you study poetry in school, or just something you picked up?
No, I write quite a bit.
You write, okay. And you also used a lot of metaphors, gleaming swords of death, tank becomes a torch, very powerful, and the alliteration. So how long did you work on that poem?
I can't remember.
A long time.
Would you like me to finish it? It's almost finished.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had.
No. There has been no progress at Panmunjom today. People the world over listening to the news are heard to say, nothing much is happening there. The men out on patrol are shot. The bombs still cut their swirls of death. Men cowering in foxholes curse big guns. 7 mothers put on clothes of mourning, and a starving child cries himself to sleep. These things accent the dreadful fact there has been no progress at Panmunjom today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Al, if Larry were to read that in your group, how do you critique? How does your group operate?
Well, when someone reads, we try to be gentle. And we say, hey, and as you heard Larry speak, we say, how did you get to write that story? Because the way the writing group works, I send out a writing prompt that says, this is what we're going to write about, or write about anything as long as you can write. And so Larry wrote about his experience of being there, and we say, God, tell us more about it, Larry. I mean, and Larry had told us about being high up in a mountain and the difficulties of food getting to him and water getting to him because of the distance. And then we would critique it and say, you know, boy, that's quite an experience that you had. And basically that was it.
Very, very vivid images, very
Yes.
powerfully, really paints a wonderful, powerful picture. All right, well, let's move from something that's very, very, very serious, war, to a story that I think is very interesting because a little twist at the end. Art Chapman is going to read a story of his, and this is your bad dream?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Art,
Okay.
your background, what were you?
I was in technology for 45 years, and my last 20 years was in a financial institution where I ran the technology side of call centers.
Great, great. Okay, well, we'll turn over to Art Chapman, Bad Dream.
I had given donations to a certain charity for years. A volunteer from that charity called me every year during their annual fundraising drive. Each time they called, I felt more and more pressure to increase my pledge. Their inducements to raise my giving ranged all over the place. They would tell me why not increasing the amount hurt those they helped. They reminded me that they published each giver's amount annually in a book that was widely read. There was an implication that I would lose self-esteem when people I knew read my giving decision. They also reminded me that I was relatively well off and would feel terrible guilt from not working harder to help those less fortunate. The calls would get adversarial when I didn't heed their pleas. Some volunteers personally impugned my character. This time, when I hung up from the latest call, I was drained. I drifted off to a restless sleep and had a nightmare. Those who were served by this charity were outside my window wailing. Their suffering was underscored by their pleas for help. Finally, 2 volunteers banged on my front door, yelling for me to let them in. I finally opened the door. They forcibly dragged me over to my desk where my checkbook lay open. They reminded me that I'd had a chance to increase my pledge and had turned them down. They now told me that they were taking matters into their own hands. One volunteer held me in my chair while the other one made me write a check to the charity for $200 above my previous year's pledge. My pleading to let me go went unheeded. One volunteer then ripped the check out of my checkbook. They both admonished me to listen to them and act accordingly the next time they called. Then they left my house. I woke up with a flinch. I was wringing wet. I felt like I hadn't slept all night. I got up from my bed, took a shower, shaved, and dressed. I felt relief that it had only been a dream. After making a cup of coffee, I went over to my desk. My checkbook was still there, but one check was missing.
Sort of a Twilight Zone. I take it that you've had an experience like that before?
Don't go there. I think that there are a lot of people, like when you're in senior groups, MEL, a lot of people go to lunch together, etc., or in other groups that we've been in. You talk about things, and people tell you things that they're happy about, and they also tell you things that they're complaining about. And if you're a writer, as Al sometimes tells us, he's watching for things, and then when he sees something that really strikes him, he writes about it.
Right. Well, you certainly did, and I think we all kind of sympathize with that. Thanks so much, Art.
You notice, Ron, he didn't say he had signed that check.
Bill, what are some other groups that people in MEL might be participating in?
Well, we have both the intellectual, we have a lot of physical activity group. We have a Monday morning biking group that goes most of the year. We play water volleyball. There's a number of card games present. In the summer, Larry runs the line ball program. There is 14 regular programs that repeat every month. Lunch, of course, lunch and eating is a big part of it. Some people say MEL means men enjoying lunch. But that's the camaraderie of our group, and that's where we've gotten to know each other over breaking bread.
We'll talk a little bit more about those groups. We have, I guess, a lady enjoying leisure with us today. We have Carol Friedlander. And Carol, it's sort of like so many thorns with a rose here. You're here because?
My late husband was a devoted member of the writing group.
Okay.
In fact, he wrote a book and he printed 31 short stories or poems that he did while he was a member.
Wow. And so you're going to read, this is Carol Friedlander, you're going to read one of your husband's.
Right.
Like it's a humorous one, and being a pet owner, I could really relate to this one. So please, Carol's going to read The Consequences of a Lack of Influence.
I never knew how little influence I had until the day the dog made himself at home on my favorite lounge chair. That comfortable chair sits right in front of the TV, which I watch when turned on, or read from, the chair that is, when not. It was late in the afternoon, and I was ready for the evening news before dinner. A little nap wouldn't hurt either. So naturally, I shooed the dog away. Twice? 3 times. No movement whatsoever occurred. Laddie is a big dog, so picking him up forcibly was no option. Instead, I sat down on the uncomfortable couch and grumped a bit at my lack of personal power, as well as the generally awful state of the world. That night at dinner, which by the way didn't taste so good, I noticed that Laddie was browsing around the table looking for a handout, but definitely off the chair. After dessert, I quickly ran to recapture my position of dominance, but it was too late. There was the dog, looking very comfortable, haughty, and knowing. I wondered to myself just what a dog could possibly know. Gathering my strength, I shooed Laddie off my chair with more force in my voice than before. Then I bullied him. Then at last I begged, all to no avail. Sleep that night came fitfully. I think that I may have dreamed that I was a dog, lording it over my domain. But by first morning light, I wasn't sure that I had such a dream. The next several days proved to be a repeat of that primordial event. Whenever I wanted to sit on my chair, there was the dog preventing me from my desire. My wife thought the situation to be very funny. Ha ha! Frankly, I wanted to sit on her. Finally, I resolved to take matters in hand and under my control. After all, I was a human being with a big brain, one of those superior types. I could play at this stupid game too. Laddie normally slept in a large dog cage located in the kitchen area. I crawled into the cage and curled up, pretending to be comfortable with a haughty and knowing look on my face. I'll show him, I thought. Several hours later, I must have fallen asleep. I saw the cage door open, and there was Laddie bringing me food and refilling my water dish. Funny, Laddie seemed to resemble one of my relatives, but I knew this was ridiculous. The crazy thing about this occurrence is that I ate all the food with great relish and looked forward to the next feeding time. When Laddie later opened the cage door, he seemed to want to crawl in with me. I wouldn't let him. How dare he? This was my domain.
Thanks. I've had that happen to me with my dogs. I've actually crawled into the cage, and they wouldn't go after me. Thanks so much, Carol. Gentlemen, is there a community service aspect to MEL?
Yes, there is. We have volunteered many times for the community. One of our first activities was going to Cabrini Green to help organize a library at one of the schools in that area. And every year I talk to the guys into helping out the food depository gather food after the annual restaurant shows. And, we get about a dozen guys to come down and help gather the food, and of course we follow it up with dinner.
Of course. Okay. We have our next reader, Ralph Raybach, is going to give us a little bit of a memoir about his family's survival during the Holocaust. And Gilda, our director, we have a piece of a graphic novel that was on a calendar put up by the Illinois Holocaust Museum. So Gilda, can we get there it is. And Ralph, this is something that was in honor of your family, right?
Yes. Well, 12 of us for the 12 months of 2012 were featured on this calendar done by the Monroe Corporation. And my story is taken from some of my writings because we created a writing group at the Illinois Holocaust Museum because of what I found out was going on with our MEL writers group. And so we created a group of survivors to tell our stories. And one of my stories was put into this graphic novel.
Thank you. And you're going to read a little summary of what happened. Please go ahead.
I was born in Gotha, Germany in 1934 to parents Hans and Ruth. For several generations, the Raybach family lived comfortable middle-class lives in Germany. Once Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in 1933, all that changed. On November 8, 1938, we began travel to the American Embassy in Berlin for a November 10th appointment, November 10th, remember that date, during which we were to secure immigration certificates known as visas. Life had changed for our family since the Nazi ascendance, and neighbors treated us coldly and indifferently. In this climate, my father knew that something could go wrong at any time, especially while the family was away from home. So he set up a coded signal with a young girl who was in our home so that in case of trouble, she was to telephone my father saying, "The English lesson is canceled." On the evening of November 9th, 1938, through Germany and Austria, the Nazis burned over 1,000 synagogues, looted and destroyed thousands of Jewish-owned businesses, and arrested 30,000 men between the ages of 16 and 60. My father had just missed being one of those 30,000 by not being home that night. This infamous night, known as Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, is now being called the November Pogrom, which is a riot against everything Jewish. We kept our appointment at the embassy on the 10th and got our visa, after which my father went into hiding. He escaped to England soon after and waited the arrival of my mother and me. We made our way to the border with Holland and Germany. Miraculously and mysteriously, a Dutch stranger whispered to my mother for us to run with him, with no questions asked. We were guided to a local train on the Dutch side of the border, and this was freedom, because Holland was not overrun until 1940, and this was 1938. We met my father in England, and we soon boarded a ship destined for America. Thanks to the stranger, we were safely out of the Nazi grasp, and we survived the Holocaust, during which 6 million Jews and millions of others lost their lives. That night of November the 9th, 1938, is considered by historians the beginning of the end and the end of the the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end.
Thank you, Ralph. Very moving. It's really gripping. How fortunate your family was. We're gonna go right to our next speaker to make sure we get him in. This is certainly a little bit different. Walter Brown, as you retired, you said you sort of collected quotes about retirement?
Yes, I did. In fact, in my career as a PR guy with Amico, I did a lot of writing stories and articles myself. But when I retired, I decided to collect, because I kept hearing different people talking about different things that were very interesting about the retirement process or aging. And I even came up with a few originals of my own, Ron.
Okay, well, looking forward to it.
Okay, maybe one of the best ones, one of our co-founders of the group said, "It's okay to get older. It's not okay to get old." I heard one of our fellows talked about an incident. His wife came home, caught him on the sofa, and she was mad. She had done a lot of shopping. And she was complaining, "Oh, all you do is you're enjoying this too much. You're relaxing and all this leisure activity. You know, what are you doing?" And he replied, "I was made for this life." A wife of one of our members who was dying slowly told another wife of a member who had been recently widowed, "Soon I'll be joining your club." I think that these quotes are trying to be funny or poignant or generally interesting. I came up with a few originals, which I'll close with. Seniors are always accused of being forgetful. They don't remember anything that happened. Well, for myself, I don't forget things that happened in the past. I just remember them wrongly. And then Bill mentioned going out with a biking group. Well, to me, sometimes going out with the biking group is like reliving my childhood. You know, you call up your boyfriends to see if they want to go out and play. And in closing, I feel that retirement is popular because it combines a maximum of activities and relationships with a minimum of responsibilities.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Walter. Thank you to all of our readers today. Want to appreciate our readers today, and gentlemen, you for coming on and talking to us about your group. Hope to have you back, and we can discuss MEL more later. Right now, this is Ron Levitsky saying thanks for joining us, and thank you to the gentlemen of MEL, Men Enjoy Leisure. Have a good day. So you have a lot of food.